The station called Helix Point floated quietly between three star systems, a place built not for beauty but for agreement. Its halls were wide, its lights soft, and its air carefully balanced so that dozens of species could breathe without discomfort. Delegates came here to talk, to negotiate, and to pretend they understood one another. Evan Calder walked through the main concourse with his hands loosely at his sides, trying not to stare. He had been trained not to stare. Still, it was difficult not to notice everything. A tall, insect-like being passed him, its translucent wings folded neatly against its back. A pair of blue-skinned traders argued softly in musical tones near a food stall. Above them, glowing signs shifted language automatically as people passed underneath. Evan was human. That fact alone made him noticeable. Humans were still new to the wider galactic community. Not unknown, not feared, just underestimated. Most species thought of humans as emotional, impulsive, and inefficient. Good for creative tasks, maybe, but unreliable. Evan had heard the descriptions during closed briefings and open conferences alike. He did not argue with them. He just did his job. Breaths. Tonight, his job was simple. Attend a social reception. Smile. Answer questions. Avoid causing diplomatic problems. Easy enough. The reception hall was large and softly lit, with long tables that adjusted height and shape depending on who stood near them. Drinks floated in small gravity wells, each labeled with chemical content and safety warnings. Evan selected something labeled mildly stimulating, non-toxic to carbon-based life, and took a careful sip. It tasted like warm citrus and static. He grimaced slightly, then laughed at himself. Across the room, conversations flowed. Some were loud, some quiet. Some were spoken, others exchanged through color shifts, hand signals, or subtle changes in posture. Evan stood near the edge, listening when spoken to, nodding when he did not fully understand. That was when he felt it. Not a sound. Not a touch. A pause. The room did not actually go silent, but something shifted. Evan looked up, confused, and followed the direction of several stairs. She was standing near the center of the hall. She was tall, taller than most humans, with smooth silver-gray skin that reflected the lights like calm water. Her eyes were dark and reflective, without visible pupils, and her clothing was layered and elegant, clearly marking her as someone of status. Breath. Thin bands of light moved slowly along her sleeves, responding to her breathing. She was looking directly at Evan. Not casually. Not with curiosity. With certainty. Evan frowned slightly and glanced behind him, just to be sure. No one stood there. When he looked back, she was still watching him. Then she turned to the group beside her, 3 others of her species, similar in appearance but less adorned, and spoke. Her voice carried easily across the room, clear and calm. "That's my husband." The words were translated instantly into every language present. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. A drink sphere drifted free and popped softly against the ceiling. Someone made a startled clicking sound. Evan nearly choked on his drink. He stared at her. Breath. She stared back. Evan lowered the glass slowly. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from pure confusion. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Around him, whispers began to ripple like waves. Husband. Human. Is that a joke? Impossible. Evan finally managed to speak. I'm sorry, he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard. I think there's been a mistake. The woman turned fully toward him and walked closer. Each step was smooth, unhurried. The crowd parted without anyone realizing they had moved. When she stopped in front of him, she was close enough that Evan could see faint patterns beneath her skin, like slow-moving stars. There is no mistake, she said. Her tone was not defensive. It was factual. Evan swallowed. I've never met you before. Yes, she replied. You have.
He blinked. I
don't think so. You spoke to me 3 cycles ago, she said. In the Eastern Observation Ring, Evan searched his memory. 3 days ago, maybe? He had been there, staring out at a red giant, thinking about home. A conversation had happened. Someone had asked him a question. He hesitated. You asked me about the evacuation ships. Her head tilted slightly. I asked you whether saving 10,000 unknown lives was worth sacrificing one known world. Evan felt a strange chill. He remembered that clearly. You answered without delay, she continued. You said, if I don't know them yet, that just means I haven't met them. It doesn't make their lives lighter. The room was very quiet now. By him, Evan rubbed the back of his neck. That was just an answer, a thought. It was a decision, she said. You did not calculate. You did not ask for more data. You did not protect your own kind first. He shrugged helplessly. It just felt right. A murmur spread through the crowd. The woman turned slightly, addressing her companions but still facing Evan. I am Sakira, she said, of the Varathi Continuum. That name caused another ripple of reaction. Evan recognized it. The Varathi were known for their advanced cognitive sciences and strict social structures. They did not make personal declarations lightly. Bascarella looked back at Evan. Among my people, we do not choose partners by attraction or habit. We choose them by resonance. Evan frowned. When 2 minds align in ethical response under uncertainty, she explained, we form a bond. It is called a marriage in your language. Evan let out a small, nervous laugh. With respect, that seems like a pretty big conclusion to draw from one conversation.
Sakira considered him.
It was not the conversation, she said. It was the absence of hesitation.
Her friends watched closely.
Other delegates leaned in, listening. Evan felt suddenly very human. Very small. I'm just me, he said. I didn't mean anything special by it. Sakira's expression softened, just slightly. That, she said, is precisely the point. A representative from the Central Council finally stepped forward, clearing their throat. This declaration is highly irregular, they said carefully. Brave! Cross-species bonding claims require review. Sakira nodded. Of course. Evan turned to her, lowering his voice. Listen, I don't want to cause trouble. If you need to, retract that statement. She interrupted him gently. I do not speak falsely. He sighed. Despite himself, a small smile tugged at his mouth. The situation was absurd, horrifying, and somehow not hostile. The council representative looked between them. For verification, this human will be placed under observational status. Evan stiffened. Observational? Not confinement, the representative clarified.
Merely attention. Sakura inclined her head. I will remain available for all inquiries.
She looked back at Evan one last time before stepping away. Do not worry, she said quietly. You are not in danger. Evan watched her go, surrounded by murmurs and stares. He finished his strange citrus drink in one long swallow and exhaled slowly. He had come to Helix Point to represent humanity as calm, reasonable, and forgettable. Instead, an alien woman had looked at him and told the galaxy he was her husband. And somehow, deep down, Evan had the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning. Evan did not sleep that night. The assigned quarters on Helix Point were quiet, clean, and too comfortable for the thoughts running through his mind. The lights dimmed automatically. The air stayed at a perfect temperature, and the station's low hum felt like a slow heartbeat. None of it helped. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. But that's my husband. The words had been calm. Certain. Not dramatic. That was what bothered him most. By morning cycle, the station knew. Evan felt it the moment he stepped into the corridor. People glanced at him and then looked away too quickly. Others stared openly. A few whispered without bothering to hide it. Translation fields caught fragments as he passed. Human bonded to a Verathi? Impossible, or brilliant, or dangerous. Evan adjusted his jacket and kept walking. His schedule had changed overnight. Where once he had one meeting and a reception, now he had interviews, evaluations, and informal observations. No one used the word investigation, but it hovered in every pause. The first session was held in a circular room with transparent walls. Beyond them, stars drifted slowly, uncaring. A group of observers waited inside, seated at different heights, each shaped for a different species. Evan took the only chair built for humans. A tall, thin being with glassy skin spoke first. State your name and function. Evan Calder, he said. Cultural liaison, Earth delegation. Did you initiate a bonding ritual with Sakura of the Verathi? No, Evan replied immediately. I didn't even know it was a thing. Did you consent to being identified as her husband? Evan hesitated. I didn't have time to consent, or not consent. It just happened. There was a pause as several beings processed that. Another voice spoke, softer. Describe your interaction with her prior to the declaration. Evan explained the conversation in the observation ring. He kept it simple. A question. An answer. Nothing special. When he finished, the room stayed quiet. That response, one observer said slowly, matches a Verathi resonance marker with a probability margin of 0.003. Evan blinked. I don't know what that means. It means, another voice said, that among their people such a response appears perhaps once every several generations. Evan let out a breath. So, I said the right thing by accident? Several heads tilted. Accident is a human concept, the glass-skinned observer said. Your species displays a consistent pattern of intuitive ethical alignment under incomplete data, Evan frowned. That just sounds like guessing. No, the observer replied. It sounds like trust. That word followed him long after the session ended. Between interviews, Evan crossed paths with Sakura for the first time since the reception. Breath. She stood near a viewport, hands folded, watching a cluster of distant stars. She noticed him immediately. "You appear strained," she said. Evan gave a tired smile. "You could say that." She turned to face him. "The process is uncomfortable. I anticipated that." "Then why do it?" he asked, not accusing, just honestly curious. "Why say something like that in public?" "Because hiding truth creates instability," she replied, "and because delay would have suggested doubt. I had none." Evan leaned against the wall. "You realize that where I come from, marriage is a huge deal?" "Yes," she said. "A public declaration of long-term mutual recognition. Usually with paperwork," he added weakly. A faint shimmer passed along her sleeves. Evan suspected it was amusement.
"We do not expect you to fulfill human expectations," she said.
Basket. "Nor do I expect Verethi ones. The label is functional, not restrictive." "That's oddly comforting," Evan admitted. They stood in silence for a moment. "People are afraid," Evan said finally. "Not of me, of what this means." "They should be," Sakura replied calmly. He looked at her. That wasn't reassuring. "Fear is not always harmful," she said. "Sometimes it signals a shift in understanding." As the cycles passed, the observations continued. Evan was not restrained, not isolated, but he was never alone. Breath. Someone was always watching, listening, recording. At first he tried to be careful. He measured his words, thought before speaking. Proud. Tried to act like the calm, predictable human they expected. The data did not improve. It was when he stopped trying that things became worse. During a mixed species discussion on disaster response, Evan interrupted a carefully structured debate. "You're overthinking it," he said, before he could stop himself. "People trapped don't care whose fault it was. They care who shows up." The room froze. Later, during a shared meal, he split his food without being asked when a smaller delegate struggled with the portion size. The gesture was noted. Bay. When asked how humans formed alliances so quickly, he answered honestly. "We listen," he said. "And when we mess up, we admit it."
That helps.
The observers exchanged looks. Patterns began to emerge. Breath. Humans, it turned out, did not rely on fixed social algorithms. They adjusted constantly. They read tone, context, emotion. They broke rules if the rules hurt people. To many species, that was unsettling. To the Verethi, it was rare. Sakura attended several sessions with him. She never defended him, never explained him away. She simply observed, her confidence unshaken. Breaths. One cycle, an elder council member asked her directly, "Do you still stand by your claim?"
"Yes," she answered. "Even now? Especially now." Evan overheard that exchange from the next room.
He felt something tighten in his chest. He found her, later in the station's quiet garden, where artificial trees glowed softly and water flowed in gentle arcs. "Why are you so sure?" he asked. "What if I disappoint you?" Sakura considered this. "Disappointment requires expectation," she said. "But I do not expect perfection. I expect consistency. And you see that in me?" "I see it in your species," she replied. "You fail often. You correct quickly. You bond deeply. You adapt without asking permission. Breaths. She met his eyes. That is not weakness. Evan looked away, embarrassed. We don't always get it right. Neither does anyone else, she said.
You are simply honest about it. By the end of the cycle, the rumor had spread beyond Helix Point.
Messages arrived from distant systems, requests for clarification. Requests for access. Requests for human liaisons. The phrase Virafi compatible appeared in unofficial reports. Evan read one summary and laughed softly. Breaths. We're going to break something, aren't we? Yes, Sakura said. Several assumptions. That night, Evan finally slept. Brit. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough. As he drifted off, one thought stayed with him. Steady and unavoidable. He had not meant to represent humanity this way. But somehow, just by being human, he already had breath. And the galaxy was paying attention. The attention did not slow. Bet. It multiplied. Evan noticed it first in small ways. New faces in the halls, new species at meetings that had never shown interest in human affairs before. Questions that sounded polite but carried weight underneath. How do humans decide when to trust? What happens when human values conflict? Is this behavior learned or instinctive? Honestly. Sometimes clumsily. Right. Always human. Helix Point adjusted around him. Observation became routine. Curiosity turned into study. The station released a formal notice. Human cultural patterns were now classified as high-impact variables. Evan laughed when he read it. I think that means we're unpredictable, he told Sakura. She did not disagree. Instead, she watched the ripple effects with calm focus. She spoke less during councils now, choosing her moments carefully. When she did speak, others listened closely. A Virathi declaration carried weight. A confirmed one carried gravity. One cycle, Evan was invited to sit in on a closed council discussion, not as a speaker, as an example. He sat quietly while the debate unfolded around him. They bond without permanence, one delegate said. How can that be trusted? They form emotional links across incompatible systems, another replied. That destabilizes hierarchies. A third voice cut in. Or it strengthens them. All eyes eventually turned to Evan. You, a council member said, form connections quickly. Why? Evan thought for a moment. Because we don't know how long we have, he said simply. That answer changed the room. Humans, the council realized, lived with an unspoken awareness of limits, short lifespans, fragile bodies, uncertain futures. Where others planned for centuries, humans planned for moments. That urgency shaped everything. It explained their intensity, their kindness, their stubborn refusal to let go once they cared. Sakura spoke after a long silence. Desperations. Humans value presence, she said. Not outcome. That is why they resonate. The council did not argue. Instead, they asked for data. The tests became more complex, though never cruel. Ethical puzzles. Social simulations. Emotional response modeling. Evan participated in all of it, growing more tired but also more certain. He did not feel like a subject. He felt like a mirror. Other humans were brought to Helix Point. Scientists, medics, engineers, artists. The results were not identical, but the pattern held. Humans disagreed loudly. They apologized easily. They adapted in real time. They cared even when it cost them comfort. Some alien observers found it inspiring. Others found it deeply uncomfortable. One species withdrew from joint talks entirely, citing emotional contamination risk. Another requested long-term human presence on their homeworld. The galaxy did not know what to do with the species that bonded this way. Evan felt the pressure building. Not fear. Responsibility. Ray. He spoke to Sakura about it in the quiet garden, where the artificial trees had grown taller over time. I didn't sign up to be a symbol, he said. Breath. No one does, she replied. What if they expect too much? He asked. Breath. What if we fail? Sakura touched the air near his shoulder, not quite making contact. Among her people, that was closeness. Breath. Failure is assumed, she said. Your willingness to continue despite it is what matters. That was when the proposal came. The council suggested a formal classification. Humans would be designated as interpersonal integrators, a rare role, one that allowed them to act as bridges between species that could not otherwise cooperate. It was an honor. It was also a risk. Breaths. Some species objected strongly. They feared losing control of long-held systems. They feared humans changing things without permission. Evan listened to the arguments and felt a familiar pull in his chest. We're not trying to replace anyone, he said when finally allowed to speak. We just show up. That simplicity unsettled the room. The final decision was delayed. During the waiting period, Evan noticed something else. Sakura was under observation too. Not suspicion. Expectation.
Her people had not challenged her declaration, but they were watching closely.
A Virethi bond was rare. A cross-species one was unprecedented. Are you under pressure? Evan asked her one cycle. Yes, she replied, but not to withdraw. Then what? To confirm, she said. He studied her face. And are you? Yes. He let out a slow breath. You don't hesitate much, do you?
No, she said.
I learned that from you. That stopped him. I didn't teach you anything, he said. You showed it, she replied. The council reconvened. This time, the chamber was full. Observers, delegates, recorders. The decision would shape the next era of galactic interaction. The final question was not about humans. It was about trust. Can a species that bonds so freely be relied upon? The council chair asked. Evan stood, heart steady. We don't bond freely, he said. We bond, honestly. There's a difference. He looked around the room. If that scares you, that's fair. But it also means when we stand with you, we mean it. Silence followed. Wrath suffer. The Varithi stand by this assessment, she said. We do not give our bond lightly. We do not give it falsely. Her declaration echoed through the chamber. The boat passed. Humans were reclassified. The galaxy adjusted. In the days that followed, the station buzzed with activity. desperate. Plans formed. Requests filed. Concerns raised. Evan felt overwhelmed, but not alone. One evening, as the stars drifted outside the viewport, he and Sakura stood side by side. "So," Evan said, "still married?" She looked at him. "Right, do you object?" He smiled, tired but genuine. "No." "I just want to make sure I'm doing it right." She considered this. "You already are." He laughed softly. The galaxy had not found what it expected in humanity. What it found was something harder to control. Something that did not conquer. Something that connected. And that realization was only beginning to settle in. The change did not arrive loudly. There were no alarms, no sudden announcements, no sharp breaks in routine. Instead, it spread quietly, like light creeping into a dark room where no one had realized how dim it had become. Helix Point began to feel different. Evan noticed it during the morning cycles. Delegates lingered longer in shared spaces. But conversations that once stayed formal now drifted into personal stories. A few species that had once avoided humans now asked to sit near them. Psst. Not all of them were comfortable, but they were curious. Curiosity was enough. The new classification changed how humans were invited into discussions. No longer just observers or technical advisors. They were now asked to listen when talks stalled. When negotiations became tense, someone would quietly suggest, perhaps a human perspective. Evan heard that phrase more times than he could count. At first, he resisted. "I'm not a solution," he said during one council session. "I'm just a person. That," the council chair replied calmly, "is exactly why you are useful." Evan did not know how to feel about that. Sakura watched all of this closely. She moved through the station with the same calm confidence as before, but Evan could sense a change in her attention. She observed not only others, but herself. One cycle, as they stood near the garden pool, she spoke quietly. "My people are learning from this." "Learning what?" Evan asked. "That certainty does not always come from structure," she replied. "Sometimes it comes from contact. The Varathi sent additional representatives. Not to challenge her, but to understand her choice. They watched how she interacted with Evan. Breath. How she listened when he spoke. How she allowed silence instead of filling it. Among her people, silence was often uncomfortable. Here, it became informative. Evan felt the pressure grow in other ways, too. Messages from Earth arrived daily, berated. Some were supportive. Others were cautious. A few were openly worried. "You're becoming a symbol," one official message warned. "Be careful." Evan stared at the words for a long time. "I never wanted that," he told Sakura later. "No one who should hold it does," she replied. She was right. That did not make it easier, but as more humans arrived at Helix Point, the differences between species became clearer, not sharper. Breath. Aliens noticed how humans gathered in small groups but welcomed outsiders without ceremony. How they touched shoulders, nodded, smiled. How they argued openly and then shared food afterward. To many species, conflict meant fracture. To humans, it often meant closeness. Burrs, a research group, presented a troubling concern to the council. Human bonding behavior spreads, one analyst said. Exposure leads to changes in local social norms. Is that harmful? Another asked. It is, Bristifrus, the analyst replied. Existing hierarchies weaken. Evan listened from the back of the room. He raised his hand. We're not trying to break anything, he said. But if something only works when people don't talk honestly, maybe it's already broken. That statement traveled far beyond the station. Some species welcomed it. Others quietly began to restrict human access. The galaxy was dividing, not into enemies, but into those willing to change and those afraid to. Ascura's people stood at a crossroads. The Varathi had built their society on predictability and deep internal trust. Rest. Humans challenged that by proving trust could be flexible, imperfect, and still strong. A Varathi elder approached Evan privately one cycle. Bration. You do not understand what you threaten, the elder said. Evan nodded. That's probably true. And yet, the elder continued, you proceed anyway. Evan met their gaze. We don't know how to stop being ourselves. The elder studied him for a long moment, then inclined their head slightly. That, they said, is troubling. It was also honest. Sakura faced her own quiet trials. Among the Varithi, some questioned whether her bond had altered her judgment. Others wondered if humans had changed her people more than anticipated. She answered their questions patiently. She did not defend Evan as exceptional. He is ordinary, she said. That is the point. That unsettled them more than praise would have. As time passed, the council proposed a new initiative. Mixed species teams led by human integrators would be assigned to long-standing disputes, not to decide outcomes, only to listen and reflect. Desperate. Evan accepted the role reluctantly. The first assignment nearly broke him. Bah! 2 species had argued for generations over shared space. The details were complex, old, and emotionally heavy. Evan listened for days, barely speaking. At the end, he said only one thing. You both sound tired. The room fell silent. No one had said that before. Bree. The talks did not end that day, but they changed tone, breath. That pattern repeated. Humans did not bring answers. They brought recognition. The galaxy slowly realized something unsettling. Humans did not lead by command. They led by presence. That frightened those who relied on control. One night, Evan sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stars. But for the first time since arriving at Helix Point, he felt doubt creep in. What if we're doing harm without meaning to? He asked Sakura later. She did not answer immediately. Change always harms something, she said finally. The question is whether it harms what should already be ending. Evan sighed. I wish we could be less... Duration. Intense. She looked at him. Would you choose to be? He thought about Earth, about people, duration, about love, arguments, mistakes, forgiveness. No, he said quietly. Then neither will the galaxy, she replied. The council scheduled a formal review of human involvement. But some feared growing dependence, duration. Others feared growing influence. The session lasted an entire cycle. When it ended, the conclusion was clear. Human presence would not be reduced. Breath. It would be expanded carefully. Evan felt the weight of that decision settle over him like gravity. That evening, as lights dimmed across Helix Point, he and Sakura stood once more by the viewport. "I never asked you something," Evan said. "Bert." "What?" she replied. "Why me?" he asked. Out of all humans, she looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because you did not try to represent anything," she said. "You simply were." He smiled faintly. "That's a dangerous qualification."
Yes, she agreed.
Which is why it works. Outside, the stars continued their slow dance. Inside, the galaxy adjusted its understanding once more. But because quietly and steadily, they made room for others. Time changed things, but not in the way Evan once feared. The galaxy did not fall apart. It did not unite overnight, either. What it did was slower and harder. It learned Helix Point was no longer just a station of meetings. It had become a place of return. Delegates who finished their work often stayed longer than required. Some came back even when they had no official reason to do so. They said the station felt calmer now. Evan heard that often. He never knew how to respond. He still woke early, still drank the strange citrus drink, though he had learned to enjoy it. Still walked the halls and nodded to beings whose names he could not pronounce, but whose habits he recognized. He was no longer just observed. He was expected. That realization had taken time to settle. When it finally did, it came with a quiet sense of acceptance. Evan had always believed that doing his best meant staying small, staying careful. The galaxy had taught him otherwise. Humans had spread out across the Council's work, not as leaders, but as connectors. Some returned home after their assignments, carrying stories that sounded unreal to anyone who had never left Earth. Others stayed longer, forming friendships that ignored borders and biology. None of it was planned. That was the most human part of all. Sakura's people completed their long review. When the result was announced, it surprised many. The Virathi formally adjusted their bonding doctrine. Not abandoned it, not replaced it. They expanded it. For the first time in their recorded history, they acknowledged that resonance could form through exposure, not just structure. Through shared moments, not only shared tests. It was a small change on paper. It was enormous in meaning. Sakura stood before her people and spoke plainly. "The human did not weaken our understanding," she said. "He revealed the blind spot."
That statement echoed far beyond the Virathi.
Evan did not attend that session. He waited in the quiet garden, watching the water move in slow patterns. When Sakura returned, he stood. "Well?" he asked. She looked at him, and for the first time since he had known her, she smiled openly. "They will remember this," she said. He nodded. "That sounds heavy." "Yes," she replied. "It is." They walked together through the garden, neither speaking for a while. The council later offered Evan a permanent role, a title, authority. He declined. "I'll keep doing the work," he said. "I just don't want to be above it." The council accepted his answer without argument. They had learned, too, the fear that once followed humans began to soften. It did not disappear, but it changed shape. Where once species feared being influenced, now many feared being left out. Requests for human liaisons increased. so did human refusals. We can't be everywhere, Evan reminded them. And we shouldn't be.
That restraint mattered. The galaxy learned another lesson from humanity.
Limits were not failures. They were honesty. One cycle, a young delegate from a distant system approached Evan nervously. Is it true, they asked, that humans make family wherever they go? Evan thought of Earth, of friends, of Sakira, of conversations that changed rooms without anyone noticing.
Yes, he said gently.
But we don't force it, we just leave the door open. The delegate seemed to relax at that. As for Evan and Sakira, nothing dramatic happened. There was no ceremony. No sudden declaration. No attempt to fit their bond into either culture's rules. They shared meals. Silence. Long talks about nothing important and everything meaningful. The word husband remained, not because it needed to, but because no better translation existed. One evening, as the station lights dimmed, Evan stood at the viewport alone. The stars felt familiar now, not distant. Sakira joined him. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Bah.
That moment? She did not need clarification. No, she said.
Do you? He thought carefully. Sometimes I miss being invisible, he admitted, but I don't miss pretending I was. She nodded. That, she said, is also human. The galaxy slowly wrote new stories about humanity, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as beings who arrived, listened, stayed, and changed things simply by caring when it would have been easier not to. In time, the phrase that once caused shock became ordinary. That's my husband. Not a claim of ownership, not a statement of power, but a quiet recognition. And when others heard it, they no longer froze. They smiled. Because now they understood what it meant. Humans did not belong to the galaxy by force. They belonged because they connected. And once connected, they did not let go. The end was not loud. It was steady, just like humanity itself.